Arts Visalia is very excited today to be speaking with Paul Buxman, one of our fall featured artists, talking about his exhibition, California Farm in Foothill. Paul Buxman grew up in the San Joaquin Valley, is a farmer, painter, and environmentalist. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Michelle. Good to be here in my living room, actually talking to you in your gallery.
Yeah, we're doing it a little socially distant today.
Yeah, that's right, a little bit.
So why don't you go ahead and we'll start with you telling us a bit about yourself.
Well, I never really pictured myself becoming a painter. Actually, I grew up on a small family farm. I was surrounded by farmers, and I just knew that I would farm. But I was also the youngest of a family of 4 children, and I was weaker than my brothers. I do recall my father telling my mother, they did not know I heard this. We were on a walk around the ranch and I was trailing behind them. And my father said, Paul is too weak to farm. He's going to have to find something else to do. Now I was not even 9 years old yet, but in the 3rd grade, my teacher saw some of my drawings and said, and this was all within the same week, Paul, those are nice drawings. I think one day you could be an artist. I went home and announced that to my parents because I thought if I can't farm, then at least I found something I can do. And probably unlike most kids who color and enjoy it, I felt like if I don't learn how to draw and paint, I'll be lost. So I really went after it. And my father knew how serious I was. We never had a talk about it exactly, but he enrolled me at Reedley College at age 9. And I got into the drawing and painting classes, and they were teaching plein air painting. The professor took me in and treated me just like any of the other college kids. I didn't even think much about it. But my parents knew that I was serious, and also they took me to across the Golden Gate over into Sausalito. And in my early years, they dropped me off with painters and would leave me for an afternoon and express that our son wants to be a painter. Would you visit with him and talk to him? So I had very supportive parents. They never expected me to farm, and I never expected to farm. Complete surprise.
Yeah. So the Central Valley hasn't been the most popular subject for artists, including artists who are here from the Central Valley. Why did you choose the Central Valley, and what particular subjects interest you here?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll go back a little. Just before graduating from art school, my professor, Carl Steele, told me, Paul, whatever you do, don't try to make a living at this. I thought, what? I mean, I'm just about to graduate. I don't know anything else. He goes, look, if you have to make a living at it, you'll end up in these galleries, and you're going to have to paint what sells, and you'll never be worth a hoot. What you've got to do is get a life that is worth living, that provides ample opportunity and time to paint. Then paint your autobiography, okay? You got that? What I didn't know was that he was just months from dying. When I graduated, he was in the last throes of cancer, but he never told any of us of that. So all of a sudden, rather than trying to go get into a gallery somewhere, I really thought about what he said. And I ended up actually without a credential teaching. And the reason I went into teaching was so that I would have the 3 months off, which was what all the schools used to do back then. You know, you had 3 months off in the summer, right? That's when I'll paint. But they didn't have a principal up in the mountains where I was teaching. So that fell to me. I didn't want it, but that made it almost year round for me. That's why I left after 10 years and bought Dad's family farm, which took me 30 years to pay for. But then I would at least have the dormant period during the pruning time to paint. And that's what I announced to my parents, that I needed to farm in order to paint. That didn't go over too well with my dad, who had farmed this place his whole life. In fact, he told me, hey, you cannot pick up the paintbrush and the shovel at the same time. You pick up one or the other, but not both. I was very stubborn. I was just 30 years old, and I said, Dad, I will pick up both. And that's what I've done. And eventually Dad saw that I made good on it. I have farmed full-time, and I have painted just as full-time. So they've gone hand in hand for me, and farming allowed me to paint what I love and what I know best. And that's why I paint the valley and the foothills, and especially the area where you will see both farming and foothills together. If you look at this painting in back of me, you can kind of see there's a farm here, and then in back of that, there's even a little bit of citrus growing here, but then there's the Sierra foothills. I love that little place where they interact, you know, kind of, you can farm up this high, but now it's too rocky, can't farm anymore. All natural here, all cultivated here. I love that little interface there.
Many of the farms here in the Central Valley are now large corporate farms with just single crops. Has this impacted how you find your subjects?
Oh boy, has it ever. I mean, when I started painting, I mean, almost every farm was unique. It had a unique configuration. There were odd things growing. The rows weren't even that straight. I mean, my neighbor's grapes went like this. You know, they planted them just with a string. You know, oh, and they were planted by a mule. I mean, they just, you know, the rows would be 12 feet wide here, and it'd end up 10 feet down at the end. There was a lot of variation on a theme, okay? Kind of like in music, they call it variations on a theme. Well, that's kind of what art really is. You have a theme, and then you have the variations. And so you can paint like these rows of citrus here, but every tree is unique. And you'll notice that by getting a little elevation, you can see the road goes, you know, and it goes down and curves. And so I'm always looking for that. There's less and less of this variation. We have the theme, not so much variation. And then sometimes I get very saddened by that. I've gone back to places that I loved and thought I would paint them from a different angle. Gone. There's really not much interesting about solid thousands of acres of one kind of tree, no weeds. So you have one color, one shape. I mean, if I liked painting geography lessons, you know, maybe that would be good. I mean, some people like to paint, you know, Mondrian kind of things. I'm just not a Mondrian kind of guy. I want to see, you know, a little bit of this and that. And so I have to hunt a little further. What it's done is driven me a little bit from the valley up toward the foothill, because in the foothills, you just can't get corporate agriculture going. Maybe you can get cattle raising, but even then, if you look at the valley where you see all the dairies and the cattle, you don't want to paint that. It's just cows stuck in muck, and they're flat, and it's hot, and it smells bad. You go up in the mountains and you see the cattle up there. They're happy, they're beautiful, and they're here and there, and they come over, they're curious, you know. And so I've always loved to paint cows in the foothill, and I even paint some of the fences that are there, some of the cattle guards I've painted. And always there's a couple of curious cows that come in and get into painting, which is a lot of fun. I can still find beautiful farms. Often the owner doesn't live in the home anymore. So I get to know the workers that actually are now renting the home. It's a little different getting to know the people. There's the house. There's the grapes that makes his living. Here's the old man in a pickup that needs power steering fluid. And here's the drop, the ditch, the water that is the lifeblood for those grapes that are going to turn into raisins. You know, what can be better than that? I mean, it's almost like a still life of somebody making raisin bread. You know, it's all there. It's a theme, it's a variation, it's still small, it's still human sized.
So landscape painting has been somewhat romanticized by stories of Impressionist painters like Monet and Van Gogh and many others. What's it really been like to paint on location for over 50 years?
Well, some people, I've heard someone say, that must be really fun or rewarding. That must be, what's the word they often use? Relaxing. Anybody that has tried to stand in this valley through an afternoon in the late summer and not move for 6 hours until the sun is gone knows that that's not an idea that you would have for fun. It's blistering. your hands will burn up unless I cover them with, I have to put gloves on, not to keep me from getting into the turpentine, just to keep the sun from burning them. I've had eye damage from reflective surfaces. I've gone in and had blisters on my retina. I know that people that really take painting on location seriously, in this valley, it can actually be dangerous. I have to wear a towel and I put ice under my hat and I put it down and let the ice water drip down. I'm not uncomfortable in the way of thinking, wow, I am uncomfortable. I don't really notice it until the painting's over. What happens when you're painting out there is it does completely take all of your focus, all of your attention. And that's a good thing. Now, you really don't notice the pain until finally it's over. Maybe it's kind of like running a race. You know, while you have adrenaline, you're fine. When the race is over, you collapse on the ground, you can't get up. It's difficult. There's a lot of stuff in the air that's not good. I carry a lot of ice water. My painting season, because I was a farmer, was always after the crop. So I didn't get to paint generally until the end of August. So my painting session actually now is going to begin next week. And I will paint all the way through to spring. So I have been helping the young farmers who are now farming my farm because I'm semi-retired. So I was checking water all morning, shoveling. I've still got to help the young people with the farm. But harvest is over and I'm already making plans. And I didn't go out this morning. It was a little too hot in the studio. I got to get started at 5:30 in the morning. You got to get canvases stretched and all that. But it is not a romantic setting, for one thing. Almost no one jumps out of their car with a camera and takes pictures of a ditch or even takes pictures of rows of grapes. You know, maybe if you're in Napa, Sonoma, maybe if you're over at the coast and you see those beautiful wineries, you know, like that. I've never been all that attracted to things that are already pretty. I'm attracted to things that have a lot of heart and soul and story, and that you can take something that is maybe even almost difficult to live in and difficult to be around, and yet when it's painted right, somehow it changes from sort of being adversarial to being an intimate close friend. I think the paintings can take something mundane and maybe even harsh and make them friendly, which I hope then makes people who live in the valley, who are always trying to get out of here, say, you know, there is something about living here that I kind of like, but I'm almost embarrassed to tell my friends from the Bay Area because they wouldn't understand.
So you have this very diverse color palette. Is your choice of colors influenced by the subject, or is it more of a stylistic choice?
Well, back in art school, you know, I was following a post-impressionist, and one of the first things that he said was, look, the best color, the brightest color, the most brilliant color in the impressionist works was cobalt blue, and ultramarine maybe second. But do not neglect, because you're painting outdoors, there will never be any black. You can't put any black on your palette. If you want to create darks, it has to be done with blues. Ultramarine mixed with vermilion is how we created black. It's not a true black, but it's an outdoor dark. So you'll notice a lot of blue in my paintings, and that comes from the Impressionist palette. It's also, it's not a limited palette, and I love a limited palette, I do. I mean, I love tonal paintings, and all of my paintings begin with only two colors, and I complete the entire painting as a tonal painting in two colors. And that takes me about an hour and a half, and it's a little bit like a tonal sketch. If you look at any of the finished works, you can see all of these, that underlying color, and it's not gone back into. So I use ultramarine as the sketching color, and I love brilliant color, and I look for it. And when you think about it, it's kind of like you see this huge scene and you condense it. And even the color is condensed. And so, I take what would be, a half a mile wide, and I squeeze it down into a small window. And so things are brought up in intensity. Outside, they're really brilliant. But when you bring them inside under incandescent light, there is a bit of a drop. And I'm glad I paint brilliantly in color, because when I come inside, they look almost exactly like what I remember seeing outside. And it could be that my cataract, which is moving along pretty quickly now, has maybe influenced that I don't see things quite as brightly, and maybe I'm trying to key up in order to be able to record what I think I'm seeing. Could be just, my eyes are playing tricks on me. I'm not sure.
So what has been the driving force that has kept you painting in the Central Valley for over 50 years?
Actually, I could probably almost cry tears over this. I knew I would be a painter early on, and it wasn't like, oh boy, I want to be a painter. I was desperate not to be homeless, and I really think I was so scared of not being able to farm. It really drove me. When I started farming, within the first 5 years, we lost our crops to hail, and then markets collapsed. And painting, I fell back on that to save the farm, and at least on 2 occasions. One, when my son got cancer due to actually a increased pesticide in the water where we live. They rejected his insurance because I had left teaching, and now I was an independent farmer, and they said, oh, we have to rewrite your policy. Your son has cancer. He's not, we can't cover him. You can imagine 5 years of treatments, and I didn't have the insurance to cover that. So I had paintings, and my friends and neighbors and loved ones came and bought out entire shows. And my doctor, who really fell in love with my son named Wyeth, named after N.C. Wyeth, the older Wyeth painter who did the illustrations, that doctor did not charge me full, and brought my son back to health, and Wyeth is still alive today and doing well. But painting has helped me to get out of a corner. I owed so much on this farm, and in one credit, and paid it off. Now, that doesn't mean my paintings are so great, or that, wow, they're worth a lot. I don't know what they're worth, to be honest. So I charge what some people think would be a lot, and others don't think it's all that much. But it has been out of necessity. But beyond that, when I'm painting, I don't think like that. If you're starving and you're fishing, all you can think about is bringing that fish in so you have something to eat. But that's not the case for me. I never think of income. I never think of it as being something I'll sell. Most of the time I think, well, here's pushed out trees over and over again because they look like Monet haystacks. It's all we got here. We don't have haystacks. And those are all sold. I've painted at least 100 ditches. They're all but 3 are sold. Painted hay bales, and all just numerous things that you don't think of that people would want to have in their homes. And I never think of it, but I'm always amazed, humbled that people would buy the paintings. In some ways, I'm kind of shocked and maybe even a little frightened that maybe they're going to wake up one day and realize I don't know what the heck I'm doing, and I better get out of town before they realize. But somehow people keep coming back and buying the work and sort of hinting, Paul, this is not bad. This is really good. And it gives me courage, but you can't get cocky in this business, I tell you. You just can't. Painting keeps you humble. It beats you up, and this valley keeps you, from getting too far ahead of yourself.
So if a young artist were to ask you for a few guiding tips on becoming a professional painter, what would you tell them?
Actually, I've had that opportunity several times. One thing is that they shouldn't try so hard to be successful. And usually when people are trying to get into a show, they're trying to win awards. I went down that road for a while. It's kind of empty. First of all, the galleries that will allow you in are going to take so much of your income that you're basically locked in. You're going to sign all kinds of commitments, probably for life. And if you're really trying to get noticed, a lot of times people will be tempted, young artists, to look at what's being noticed and then try to paint like that. Or they're going to say, everybody's painting like this, so I'm going to paint different like that. And instead of actually having a joy of that, it's a little bit like watching a cooking show and you're going to be judged when it's all over on how perfect it is. You know what? I see those cooking shows with that guy that is going to tell you what's wrong with it. Oh my gosh, is that so far from a beautiful meal with your loved one, you know, under the trees and as the sun is going? I mean, what happened to us that we're competing? Somehow trying to become successful becomes a competition, and you can see that in people's work. It becomes kind of slick, or it's a little bit like you're sort of beginning to maybe look once and paint 10 times. And what I would tell a person is look 10 times, really become familiar with the subject, and then paint once. Look 10 times, paint one time. The other thing is that I think the advice that my professor gave me, get a life worth living and then paint your autobiography. But make sure that the life you have allows for enough time. If you take a job that is just 9 to 5, and then when you get home, you still have stuff you have to complete, not only is your art going to suffer, but your family, your personal life, and everything else. You have to give up trying to be rich, for one thing, and buy the fancy place. You know, it doesn't mean you have to be a starving artist, but make your life more faceted than I put colors on canvas. If all you do is put colors on canvas, it's going to show up in your work. Why not? You know, if you're going to paint a still life, be familiar with those things. You know, if you're going to paint, you know, if you're going to paint bread, be a bread maker. Make bread, you know, make sourdough, you know, and then paint that. Don't just paint a pretty loaf of bread with a bottle of wine that you don't even like, only because it's the right color. You know, go out and look at where you live. Paint your own home. Paint your yard. Paint yourself. Paint your wife. Paint your kids. Paint your dog. Paint the things around you that are meaningful to you. That is your life. Don't try to tell somebody else's story in your work that you think would be more interesting than your own. Paint your own autobiography, and eventually people are going to see the honesty in that. They're going to see the simplicity in that. They're going to want that because it's genuine, and we have enough that's not genuine surrounding us. And in this day and age, we need genuineness. So be genuine, and don't be afraid that your work isn't as good as somebody else's or is better than somebody else's. Forget those worse than, better than. Just paint what you are intimately familiar with, and you can't go wrong.
I love that. So is there anything else that you wanted to add or say today?
I can't think of anything other than I hope I haven't wasted the listener's time. I always say that prayer, don't let me waste anybody's time, please. If anybody is watching this, I'm both amazed and humbled, because why would you do that? You know, you could be off doing something else. But if you're watching this, I'm both amazed and humbled, and I thank you for considering people that we actually pay and encourage to do viewing for us and to bring back their reflections. That's what I do. I go out and I view things for you, and then I bring them back, and then you can have them like a little window to look out on. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for speaking with us today. We really appreciate it, and we absolutely love having this exhibit here. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I can't wait to get back behind the easel. We'll see you later.